Is Russia resorting to sending untrained troops charging at Ukrainian lines? Is that what passes for a battle tactic in the Russian Federation? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. We're going to be talking about that and just what it seems to be achieving for the Russian armed forces. Hint, not that much right now. Let's get into it. Okay, so this leak is coming to us actually from ISW, and I ran it down. It is actually from an interview with a 3rd Special Brigade soldier who was recently fighting in Avdiivka. And what he reported was some really strange stuff. Now, we've talked on this channel extensively about Russia's layered use of its professional soldiery and their reliance on untrained, low sophistication troops with limited equipment, and how they sort of use those two in conjunction in order to solve Russia's manpower and logistics problems in this war. But it sounds like Russia has taken this up to another level entirely. One Ukrainian soldier, and this is some of this is from the Washington Post, and then some of this is from this Censor.net interview. Washington Post said that when he was fighting the Russians in Avdiivka, about 3/4 of Russian personnel his unit engaged appeared to have decent military training. And he said the rest were just confused. One other Ukrainian serviceman said that well-trained Russian soldiers used RPGs to enter their positions. So while another serviceman said that inexperienced Russian servicemen avoided attacking his position after he was able to shoot 8 soldiers in a single day. And this is exactly what you would expect from the Russian military right now, where they have some experienced troops who are relied upon to take key objectives. And this is what you would expect from a well-trained light infantry unit. They would use their weapons to prepare to cover themselves as they maneuvered, right? So literally fire and maneuver. So you use RPGs to soften up a target or suppress the enemy, and then you maneuver into your positions. That's something you would expect from a proper military unit. In contrast, a civilian with a gun, which is really what we should consider these Russian service members. If you have a civilian with a gun, that civilian may just be told to walk in a direction. It may not even occur to them to shoot back at, say, a sniper position. And certainly without training, it would be simple. You would have just 8 soldiers, right? You wouldn't have a squad. A squad would take fire, get down, return fire, and then either decide to maneuver on the enemy to attack them or to withdraw. And in this case, if you have 8 individual soldiers, you're not going to see that response. The unit won't respond. 8 soldiers will each think about their own wants and needs. 8 civilians. And they are likely all going to simply scatter around and then not go into that area later, right? That's a reasonable response as a civilian, right? It's like the bad part of town. If you have a place in town where shootings happen regularly, you just avoid that spot. But if you're a soldier, there's a place in your AO where there's regular firefights, it means you have to be in that spot. So the servicemen who encountered these inexperienced Russian personnel said they looked to be about 40 to 50 years old and were sent out in waves morning, afternoon, evening without protective vests or helmets. Now, here's the thing. I wouldn't believe this if it hadn't aligned with information I had already seen. We had seen, if you're a member of combatvetnews.com, you know that's where I have all my uncensored combat footage. And it's for members only. It drops twice a week, but we look at the footage from the front lines. And one of the things that we've seen recently, I can't show you even the thumbnails. YouTube will demonetize me. But again, become a member, support the channel. I'd really appreciate it. Link is always in the description. But one of the things we saw is that, as particularly during a Foreign Legion group doing a trench assault, we noticed that around half of the Russian service members there didn't have vests or helmets. And at first I thought to myself, well, okay, these guys are conducting a really, really bold assault, right? The military term is violence of action, right? They're hitting the objective hard, and they must have caught these Russians when they were eating or had their gear off, and that's why they don't have anything. But I thought it was weird because it doesn't really take that long to put on your gear. You need maybe 30 seconds of notice to throw on a vest, load a rifle, and put a helmet on, right? So the fact that they didn't, it was still kind of puzzling because, the Foreign Legion guys were like throwing grenades, like they weren't sneaking up on anybody. But then it came out in some leaked Russian Telegram documents that a lot of soldiers are out of helmets. They're not being issued helmets. And now we're hearing from a third source that says that at least some Russian troops are being sent out without protective vests, that's your plate carriers, or helmets. So when I hear it from a third source like this, and this makes perfect sense, this is completely in line with existing Russian tactics, where Russian forces, again, they have a because of sanctions and because of the level of casualties they take, they have a fundamental logistics problem. And that is that you have a low skill trooper that's easy to get into the field quickly. And then you have a high-skilled trooper. This is someone who can operate an artillery piece, maintain a tank, engage targets with an RPG, right? A good light infantry unit. And the problem is that you can't really bring these guys back. These guys, a good light infantry unit, is 6 months away from existing. You need at least 6 months of training together with the same unit. These guys, you can put back in the field in days. They're easily replaceable. So the question then is, how do you preserve this combat power and still make meaningful gains with this combat power? And for Russia, the answer is human wave assaults, right? Or to send these attacks out as probing elements to out Ukrainians for our positions for artillery, and then the artillery and tanks and indirect fire kind of work over the positions, and then the main light infantry assaults, right, the well-trained units, then do a suppress and maneuver attack on those Ukrainian positions. That's likely what Russia's tactics have resorted to. As ISW speculates, Russian forces used poorly trained personnel to carry out mass daily attacks on Ukrainian position and employed trained personnel with better equipment to assault specific positions after exhausting Ukrainian forces. Russians likely attempting to adapt to ground attacks to sustain are likely trying to adapt their ground attacks to sustain this higher tempo of offensive operations near Avdiivka with personnel with varying levels of training and to prevent rapid attrition of better trained units and formations. Right? No, nothing stunning here if you've been a fan of the channel, but has it actually been effective for Russian armed forces? Well, that answer, again, remains pretty untrue. If you look, here's the Avdiivka front. You can see, while there are some pretty minor changes, you can see here this assesses Russian troops owning 2 small additional windbreaks, and it looks like maybe about 6 additional buildings in Avdiivka. Again, as we talked about, this is likely not actually part of the Ukrainian defensive line. The terrain that they are most likely to want to defend is actually just a little to the west. You can see here, this Avdiivka is in the low ground. It's like a bowl. And then you have this high ground to the west where the river kind of forms here. So I actually think that this is all sort of part of the plan. Again, I was like, maybe they're going to use Avdiivka as like a defensive hold. But it sounds like that's probably not what they're going to do. But the more significant point is that compared to a week ago, right? I mean, look at, this is here, taking it back. This is the 16th. You can see Russian forces making some pretty substantive gains every day. And then in the last maybe 24, really in the last like 4 days, we've seen basically no gains out of the Russian forces. The only gain that they've made is actually to the south near Novomykhailivka. But you can see here, it looks very much like the more normal gains we've seen from Russian armed forces here, literally squeezing the Ukrainians out of maybe a city block and a half. So, and again, they're back to this grindy, relatively ineffective battle tactic. And I think a chief driver of that actually is likely the loss of Russian aviation assets. The fact that Russia's lost like 15 aircraft, it can't continue to burn at this rate. And it basically had to burn burn their aircraft that fast in order to support those infantry troops. And I'm sure they took a lot of losses among their better troops in this fight. And Russia isn't stupid. They're almost certainly aware that they cannot go around doing this sort of stuff. They can't run it again. They need to, again, they need 6 months to bring back every one of those casualties they take among their good troops. So they really need to pause and take a breather, or else they're going to simply run those good troops into the ground. Anyway, guys, that's all I had. Thank you so much. Be sure to like and hit subscribe. Tell the YouTube algorithm that I make quality content. And check us out at combatvetnews.com. New video drops tomorrow. See ya. Cheers.